Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The previous class, I told you regarding foreign exchange rate or foreign exchange. What do you mean by foreign exchange? What is foreign exchange? Elvina?
Foreign exchange refers to all the currencies other than domestic currency of a given country.
Okay, that is foreign exchange. What do you mean by foreign exchange rate? Tomlin?
Ma'am, it refers to rate at which
Rate at which?
one currency is exchanged for one another.
One currency is exchanged for the other one. Okay, so these are the two important terms which I told you. That is, one is foreign exchange, another one is foreign exchange rate. Now, next is about what are the types of foreign exchange, or how the exchange rate is fixed. This is what comes in the next topic, that is foreign exchange rate. Okay, in this we have two important types. That is, one is a fixed exchange rate, another one is a flexible exchange rate. Okay, now fixed exchange rate, when we say from that term itself, we know that the rate is fixed. Okay, flexible in the sense it changes or it fluctuates, or it is also known as flexible exchange rate, or it has got one more name, that is floating exchange rate. Okay, so it is changing, or it is floating, or it changes all the time. That is why we call it as a flexible exchange rate or the floating exchange rate. Another one I told that it is a fixed exchange rate. Now, there is a difference between these two. Fixed exchange rate is fixed by the government. Okay, fixed exchange rate is fixed all the time, or we can change the rate, that is according to the wish of the government. It will not be changed frequently. It will be fixed for months, sometimes it will be fixed for years, like that it will be. Okay, so in the fixed exchange rate, government fixes the exchange rate. So government intervenes in the exchange rate or in the foreign exchange rate, and they fixes the amount, how much it will be sold and bought, that will be fixed by the government here. Okay, for example, in China the exchange rate is fixed by the government, but it is not fixed forever. I told that it's not fixed forever. If the government wants, it can change whenever there is a high demand. Whenever the rates are very high, the government can reduce it. Like that, according to the need, they can change in this particular exchange rate, that is fixed exchange rate. Okay, now here some features. What do you mean by this fixed exchange rate? It is a system in which the exchange rate of currency is fixed by the government. It doesn't vary with the changes in demand and supply of foreign currency. In the sense, you know that market forces are there. According to that, the prices will be fixed for the foreign exchange. But here you can see who is fixing the exchange rate for that particular currency. Who is fixing? Yes, who is fixing? The government. Okay, it is not fixed according to the demand and supply of foreign currency. So it's not affected by the demand and supply of foreign currency. The government has the power to change, and the government will decide the conversion rate, in the sense at which rate this currency, one currency, will be exchanged for another currency. That conversion rate will be decided by the government. So no other interference, government is deciding everything. Next one, why the government is using this kind of fixed exchange rate? That is mainly for getting or achieving stability, because when the exchange rate becomes weaker, what happens? Or any situation, if it comes, the exchange rate becomes weaker, what the government will do? They sell the foreign currency, and when, especially just one, they buy the foreign currency, and whenever it is becoming stronger, you can see they sell the foreign currency. When exchange rate becomes weaker in the sense, or stronger in the sense, when it is strong, we can say that our currency's value is reduced. For example, $1, you might have heard, it is equal to somewhat 65 rupees or something like that. Okay, so here dollar is very strong. Our rupees, if you see, to get $1, we have to pay 65 rupees. At the same time, there is another situation, $1 is equal to 50 rupees. Okay, so here what happens? A value of our currency has increased compared to the previous situation. So whenever there is a fluctuation like this, see, when we say $1 is equal to 65 rupees, what do you mean by that?
You have to give 65 rupees to get $1.
To get $1. Okay. Now $1 is equal to 50 rupees means what? You have to give 50 rupees for getting $1. Which situation is good for our country? Which situation? I mean these two. In out of these two, which one is good for our country? Anyone?
The 50 rupees case,
50 rupees. Why do you say that?
you get more foreign exchange.
You will get more foreign exchange. Okay, so even though here it is reduced to 50 rupees, value of our currency has increased. Okay, now with 50 rupees, we can buy more things with that $1. Okay, like that if you see. So this is a situation stronger and weaker. So whenever the foreign currency or whenever the exchange rate is stronger, we sell the foreign currency. And whenever the exchange rate becomes weaker, we buy the foreign currency. Now for this, what the government will do? Government should keep lot of reserve with them, lot of reserves of foreign currencies with them to maintain the exchange level, or to maintain, or they wanted to keep a fixed exchange rate. For that purpose, to maintain that stability, the government should keep large reserves of foreign currency. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for them to maintain that fixed exchange rate. So always those countries who are using this fixed exchange rate, they will be having lot of foreign exchange currencies with them. Next one. So this one I told you regarding fixed exchange rate, it is fixed by the government, no intervention of demand and supply. Now, in the flexible or floating exchange, flexible exchange rate is also known as floating exchange rate. It always changes. You might have heard that daily the exchange rate changes in the market. Or if you see in the newspaper, daily you can see, if you take any one currency, for example, one real is equal to, you might have heard 190 rupees on one day. Maybe next day, if you see that one real, it has gone to sometimes 189 rupees. So to get one real, we have to pay 189 rupees. Like that it will be. So if daily this rate changes. Sometimes what happens, this rate will remain for 2 days. So it depends upon the demand and supply of that particular foreign currency. So flexible or floating exchange rate means that is determined by the demand and supply of the foreign exchange in the market. In the market, if there is more demand for the foreign exchange, the price will go high for that particular currency. If there is more supply in the of that particular foreign exchange, price will come down for that particular currency. So it is also known as market exchange rate. Why do we call it as market exchange rate? because the exchange rate is decided in the market or by the market forces, because it changes always with the demand and supply of the foreign currency. Here, no government intervention. Government is not influencing the market rate, or government is not interfering the market rate. Okay, now there is a well-organized foreign exchange market in our country. It's any country you can see. We have a well-organized foreign exchange market with a floating exchange rate system. Almost all the countries, they follow floating exchange rate system, because otherwise the government should have lot of foreign exchange reserves with them to use it. If we are not having, usually almost a majority of the countries, they follow the floating system, or we say that flexible exchange rate system. If there is more demand for dollar, what will happen? The price for dollar will increase or decrease? If there is more demand for dollar, the price of the dollar will increase or decrease? Think of a normal good. Consider,
Increase.
yeah, it will increase. So it's just relate this with a good. Any area, any situation, if there is a demand, high demand for a good, you know that prices will increase. The same way you can take currency as also like that. Any demand, if the demand is very high for the currency, then you can see that the price also will be very high. Okay. Now, other than this, there is another one more version for this exchange rate. I told you two are there. Now, within the floating or flexible exchange rate, we have one more version, that is managed floating exchange rate. Okay, managed floating exchange rate. Now we are telling here it is managed one, managed floating rate, or somebody is managing this flexible exchange rate. So that shows that some sort of intervention is there. Some sort of, someone is influencing in this. Okay. Why is it called managed? Because it is managed by the central bank of a country to influence the foreign exchange. Okay. So sometimes what happens, even though we have flexible exchange rate, it will be influenced by the central bank, or it will be managed by the central bank. When it is, for example, suppose the rate is very high, when our foreign exchange, when we have to pay more amount of money to other country, when the rate is very high, what the central government feels that, okay, the rate is very high, so it should be brought down. We have to reduce the rate. So what the central bank does, it may have the reserve, it has some reserves of foreign currency that will be sold in the market. When it's when central bank sells the foreign currency, what will happen? Just listen the situation, what I said now. Why the central bank is managing, especially to bring stability. Okay. So when the rate is very high, the situation is rate is very high, central bank feels that the rate should be brought down. Why the rate will be very high? When the rate will be very high? When the price will be very high?
When there's more demand.
When there is more demand. So what we have to do, we have to bring down the demand. For that purpose, what the government should do?
They will sell it.
Yeah, they will sell it. So to bring down the rate of that particular foreign currency, central bank will sell its reserves. That means more supply in the market. When more supply is there, what will happen? The prices will come down. Okay, so this is one method through which the government influence the foreign exchange rate. What is the method? What do we call for that? What is that? Tell. What is the term we are using?
Manage floating exchange
Yeah,
rate.
managed floating exchange rate. So government is managing here or central bank is managing here. Because of that reason, we say that this is called, or because of that reason, we call it as managed floating exchange rate. Okay, so it is a system in which exchange rate is determined by the market forces. At the same time, you can see central bank also influences the exchange rate by selling and buying. This way, they are influencing the foreign exchange market or foreign exchange rate. Okay, so central bank influence the exchange rate. How they are influencing the exchange rate? By buying or selling. Next one, when the central bank feels that the floating rate is very high, it starts selling the foreign exchange from its reserves. For what purpose it is doing that? To bring down the foreign exchange. So whenever the exchange rate is very high, what the central bank does? They will sell the foreign exchange or that foreign currency from its reserves. This will bring down the foreign exchange rate. At the same time, central bank, when it feels that the floating rate is very low, what they will do? It is profitable for them to buy the foreign exchange that time because the rate is very low. So what they will do? They will buy the foreign exchange. At the same time, when we buy, what happens? Slowly the demand increases. So slowly the currency's price also will be increasing. Why the government is doing like this? This is mainly to protect the importers and the exporters. Okay, and it has got one more name. The managed floating is also known as dirty floating rate. So these are the three important types of foreign exchange. Mainly I told that two types are there. They are fixed and flexible. Now one more version, one more change they have introduced. This we can say that mix of two, mix of these floating and fixed, we can say. That is managed floating rate. Now the other floating rate or flexible exchange rate I told, it is also known as pure exchange, pure floating exchange rate. Okay, so this flexible exchange rate, it is also known as pure floating exchange rate. You can just note it down, that one. It is also called pure floating exchange rate. Amalraj, what are the two types of exchange rate? Two types of exchange rates. I told you now. What are they? No? Just now I told, right? Ashish, did you hear what I said?
Yes, ma'am.
What are the two types of exchange rates?
Floating.
Huh. See, correct. Floating and that's all. Neha,
Ma'am, manage floating exchange rate and flexible floating exchange rate.
louder little more.
Manage floating exchange rate and
Flexible exchange rate, fixed exchange rate. Then another version, managed exchange rate. What do you mean by fixed exchange rate, Tomlin? What do you mean by fixed exchange rate?
Ma'am, in exchange rate of a currency is fixed by the government.
Exchange rate is fixed by the government. Karthik, what do you mean by flexible exchange rate?
Ma'am, it is exchange rate is determined by the market forces.
What are the market forces?
Demand and supply.
Demand and supply. Okay. Next, what do you mean by managed floating rate? Amal Raj, do you know?
It's a system in which the demand is.
What is it?
It is it's a system in which the rate is determined by the market forces.
Only that? You're talking about flexible exchange rate, right? What do you mean by managed floating rate or managed flexible exchange rate? Managed, flexible also, managed also. So from that wording itself, what comes? Who is managing?
Central bank.
Central bank. So managed floating rate in the sense it is determined by demand and supply also at the same time. It is influenced by central bank also. Okay. Next is about depreciation and devaluation of domestic currency. Okay. These are two different terms. Depreciation and devaluation of domestic currency. What do you mean by domestic currency? What do you mean by domestic currency? Sharath, do you know?
Indian currency.
Domestic currency, currency within a country. Okay, Sharath. Okay, so depreciation of domestic currency in the sense the value of domestic currency is getting reduced in terms of foreign currency. Why is it getting reduced? Because of demand and supply of the foreign exchange. Okay, so depreciation means value of domestic currency is reducing in terms of foreign currency. Why is it reducing? Because of demand and supply of the foreign exchange, or according to the demand and supply of foreign exchange, the value of domestic currency is reducing or it is getting reduced. That we call it as depreciation. Or it is falling. The value of domestic currency is falling. Now, what do you mean by that value of currency is falling? The country has to pay more units of currency to get 1 unit of foreign currency. Okay, for example, $1 is equal to 70 rupees. $1 is equal to 65 rupees. In these two situation, which one is considered as a depreciation for our country? Karthik?
First one.
First one. Why? Because
We have to pay more units of
we
our
have
country's
to
currency.
pay more unit of our country's currency. Because of that, the value has reduced now. Our Indian currency's value has reduced now. Okay, so depreciation happens because of demand and supply or because of the market forces of foreign exchange. Because of that reason, whenever the value is falling, That we call it as depreciation. Next one. Now, why this is happening? It is, or what are the reasons I told you that this is happening? Because of the forces of demand and supply of the foreign exchange in the foreign exchange market. Because we follow a flexible exchange rate. In that exchange rate, everything is determined by the forces of demand and supply. So whenever there is our value is reducing, that shows that that means that, or whenever there is a depreciation, it means that we have to pay more units of our currency to get 1 unit of other foreign currency. Next one. Example, when the price of foreign exchange is rising, that is from 1 rupees to 65, it was 1 rupees to 65, now it has increased to rupees 70, there is a depreciation of rupee. Rupee is depreciated. That means the same amount of $1 to get that before we used to pay 65 rupees, now we have to pay 70 rupees. Okay. Now foreigners are in advantage because before they can use only 65 rupees to buy things from our country. Now they are getting 70 rupees worth of commodities in their hand. So it is an advantage for the foreigners. But our value reduced here. Our value or our currency is depreciated here. So now in this situation, we can say that domestic goods are becoming cheaper for the foreigners. So what happens? Slowly, foreigners start demanding more and more goods. This will slowly lead to increase in exports. So there is an advantage, indirect advantage for India. In the depreciation, what happens? Domestic goods, it is becoming cheaper for the foreigners. So slowly what happens? Foreigners start demanding more and more Indian goods. This will increase the exports. Hadi, can you tell what do you mean by depreciation?
Decrease in the value.
Decrease in the value of domestic currency. Is that helpful in any manner for a particular country? Hadi, will it be helpful?
No, ma'am.
It is one side if you see, indirectly it is helpful. Okay. Why do we say indirectly it is helpful? From the side of foreigners, if you see, they are able to buy more goods now from India. You think that India, I told you the situation, $1 is equal to 65, $1 is equal to 70. These are the two situations. Now, when the $1 is equal to rupees 70, now they are able to get more goods for rupees 70 than previously. Like before they could buy only 65 rupees worth of commodities. Now because of depreciation, they could buy rupees 70 worth of goods. This shows that foreigners will be slowly starting demanding more and more goods from our country. So when the demand for domestic good increases, this will lead to increase in exports. So when we are increasing export, it is beneficial for whom? It is beneficial for that particular domestic country. Okay. Next one, devaluation. Now, what do you mean by devaluation? Devaluation of domestic currency, it means that decrease in the value only, same like decrease in the value I told previous example. where decrease is happening because of demand and supply. Here the decrease is happening because of government. Government is reducing the value of our currency. Okay, so these are two different terms. Depreciation happens when there is an influence of demand and supply in the foreign exchange market. But at the same time, devaluation happens when the government interferes, when government reduces the value of our currency. Now, why the government is doing this? Because it is done by government deliberately. Why they are doing this? Because government is raising now our currency, foreign currency, the price of foreign currency in terms of our currency. Okay. So government purposely reducing the value of our currency and raising the price for foreign currency. This why do they do? Because they wanted to increase the exports, because that situation exports will be cheaper and imports will be costlier. Now exports become cheaper in the sense more things will be demanded, and import is becoming costlier for Indians. So Indians, what they do, they stop or they reduce buying things from outside and start demanding things from inside our country. Because why do we say import is becoming costlier? Before we could buy more things with 1 unit of currency. Now we are not able to buy more things because it is reduced. It is becoming costlier because of devaluation. So what happens? The goods, the commodities, whatever we are producing in our country, that demand will increase. So this will be helpful for increasing the exports or for increasing the demand for domestic goods, that is helpful for a particular country. I told you about this devaluation policy somewhere in other class, right? Do you remember? When India devaluated our currency. Anyone? Not here I am asking. In one chapter I told you, India devaluated our currency. Why did they devaluate? Why the government did like that?
To increase exports.
To increase exports. Okay. Why? What was the reason? When was it? Somewhat. Not here I am asking. When they brought some changes in the policy. When was that?
When trade reforms was
Introduced. When was that somewhat?
1991.
1991. Yeah, mainly when we introduced the policy of liberalization, those policies, when we introduced, government devaluated our currency. Thus, I told you in the chapter liberalization, privatization. Okay, and in that chapter, reason what they told to increase the exports from our country, because exports have become cheaper for outsiders now, and for that purpose, to increase the exports. Whenever there is an increase in exports, what will happen? We will receive more and more foreign currency. So to increase the reserve of foreign currency, our government devaluated our rupee. This is mainly to increase the export so that the reserves of foreign exchange will increase. Okay. Now, yeah, the rate at which the one currency is exchanged for the another, that is what you mean by foreign exchange. Irfan, can you tell what are the types of foreign exchange? What are the types of foreign exchange? Irfan, do you know?
Ma'am, fixed,
Hmm.
floating,
And we can say one more. What is that? Managed, flexible one. Okay. Now, fixed exchange rate. What do you mean by fixed exchange rate? Aparna?
Ma'am, it refers to a system in which exchange rate for a currency is fixed by the government.
Government. Okay. Next, what do you mean by floating exchange rate? Femina?
Ma'am,
do
it
you-
refers to a system in which exchange rate is determined market forces.
That is demand and supply.
Supply.
Okay. This floating exchange rate is also known in another name, which is that? What is that? Basil? Floating exchange rate is known in another name. What is that? Pavitra?
Pure floating,
What is that?
pure floating exchange rate.
Pure floating exchange rate or flexible exchange rate. Okay. Now, one more version we have, that is managed floating rate. What do you mean by managed floating rate? Sneha?
It refers to a system in which exchange rate is determined by the market
Market forces and
supply foreign exchange. And the central bank influences the exchange rate.
okay, central bank influences the exchange rate through buying and selling. Okay. Next, I told you regarding depreciation and devaluation. Aishwarya, what do you mean by depreciation?
It is the fall in the value of domestic currency
By
by the government, by market forces.
market forces. See, depreciation and devaluation both are fall in the foreign exchange. But at the same time, there is a difference. What is that? Depreciation is happening because of forces of
Market forces.
market and market forces, that is demand and supply. And why it is helpful our country in a indirectly. And what do you mean by devaluation, Aditya?
Decreasing the value of domestic currencies by the government.
What did you say? Once more.
Decreasing the value
Yeah.
of domestic currencies
Currency.
by the government.
Why do we do that? It's mainly
To increase exports.
to increase exports from our country. So whenever the foreign exchange rises, any currency's price rises, what will happen? Either it can be depreciation or devaluation. Depreciation because of market forces, devaluation because of government. Now, this results in the depreciation, or we say that whenever the foreign exchange rises, this results in depreciation or devaluation of our rupee. This will be helpful for increasing exports from our country. How it is helping? Because it is becoming cheaper for the foreign nationals and foreign currency. Now, with the particular foreign currency, they can buy more of domestic goods here. Okay. Next period I will take, and I will give you a few simple sums related to this chapter. That is capital, that current account, capital account, few sums are there, that also I will give. Okay.